It was hard. I had walked away from one of the largest companies in the United States, and now I have a little agency in Connecticut. And I decided the best way to grow this, I was like giving new life to a company that was maybe in distress. But the one thing that I learned,
if you had a chance to talk to yourself before you sold the other business, what advice would you give knowing what you know now?
basically got hired by an agency to be the general manager. And when I took that position, a wise friend once said, well, when you take a job like that, make sure you carve a little equity out for yourself. I didn't really know what he meant, but I quickly understood that, being an owner is where it's at. And I went into the job and I talked to the owner about getting an equity stake. And, the typical thing, sure, well, we'll figure something out. Well, things, didn't really change much from that standpoint, but I ended up growing his business and doing the things that I'd learned, and the business started to grow incredibly. I brought in a buddy of mine that had worked at American Airlines in sales. So the two of us started to work really hard at growing this business. And I think when we started there, we probably were doing about 4 or 5 million in revenue, about 40 or 50 million in corporate sales of airline tickets, which amounted to about 5 million in revenue. And then we really started to grow. And at that point, I realized, look, I really want to own this company. And I've grown it, and I saw the future. And I basically went to the owner and said, it's time. Either you give us a deal here or I'm leaving. He was pretty smart. He figured us out. He carved out a deal where we created a value, and I had no money. My partner had no money. And we set up a price, and he sold the company to us. And it was completely done through a management buyout, if you will, a leverage. We had a big note. We had no money, but we were going to pay him back through the corporate profits. And I remember him saying down the road, when he did this deal, he never thought we'd be able to pay him. So he felt like he could entertain us working our tails off, and he'd still get the benefit of everything, and we would eventually default on the note. Well, once we got control of the company, that 5 million revenue eventually turned into about 36 million revenue. In 4 years, we grew into a company with 400 employees. We had offices in Los Angeles, New York, and London. I opened a London company, and we were the kind of darlings of the travel industry. We turned it to a top 5 corporate travel management companies called McGregor Travel. We were in our mid-30s, and we were kind of the wonder kids. Everyone wanted to be our client. Our client list was like a who's who of Fortune 500. We had Paramount Pictures, Sony Pictures, ESPN, Bristol Myers Squibb, Gartner Group. Then the list went on. And it was an incredible ride. I mean, it was fantastic to grow the company's revenues and reach that kind of explosive growth so quickly. Kind of I was approached by a public company to sell the business. And I said, well, how do you do this? What's the process? The guy goes, well, it was a friend of mine that sold his business to them. He goes, it's a multiple of earnings. I go, oh, really? And what's that multiple? And they told me. I go, wow, that's a pretty good deal. So I quickly looked at my business and, saw what that could be. And I started to engage in conversations. Now, at that time, I was in my 30s. I wasn't really prepared to sell a business, but it was a pretty sizable company at that point. And I hadn't really thought about post sales or, any of the things that, I should probably be thinking about. I was single. I wasn't married. And I think I just saw a carrot there that I wanted to grab, and ended up kind of doing the deal, kind of more out of fear of not knowing how our industry was going to evolve, and thinking, well, here's a big paycheck now. Let's take it while it's still there. So
when you were selling the business, right, and you were negotiating with that buyer,
right,
was it just you, or did you hire an investment banker? I mean, I know it was probably the 80s or 90s when you did this.
It was late 90s.
So did you hire an investment banker?
No.
You hire? It was just you.
It was just me. I made a pass at it in the summer, received a letter of intent, and then passed on it. And I don't know, for some reason, I was dealing with a group that I didn't like. And what happened was, so time went by, and I realized I need to make another attempt at this. And so one of the gentlemen that sold this business told me, Doug, look, they're still very interested in buying you, but why don't you go meet the CEO? So that's what I did. I said, I'm going to go talk to John Ledecky. Okay, the company was U.S. Office Products. You can go look it up. I think our transaction is buried somewhere in their 10K. I think it's online somewhere. So he said, look, you can make a better deal if you go talk to him yourself. So I got on an airplane, made an appointment to go talk to him. And I'll never forget, I had coaching from all of my Wall Street buddies. I lived in Greenwich, and one of my buddies said, yeah, I went to high school with John, and I got a little coaching. And the idea was to get the biggest multiple you could. That's all I knew. I need a multiple I knew what my earnings were, but I needed a bigger multiple. And in a course of an hour, John gave me, like an 8 or 9 multiple, not the 5 or 6 that they were talking about prior. I think I had a 5.5 multiple. He comes at me with an 8 or 9. Now, what I didn't think about at the time, it was a stock transaction, it wasn't a cash deal. It was stock. And I learned a lot post-sale about how that all transpired, because he's basically buying a company at 8 or 9 multiple, and his stock's trading at 25 times or 30 times. So you can do the math there. And he's basically buying it, with the sleeves out of his vest. Okay, someone once told us. So anyway, it was a lot of money. It was a lot of money for a kid in his 30s. And I came back, and he goes, look, this deal lasts. He looks at his watch or whatever. He goes, it's Tuesday. Quarter closes on Friday. We have to close this deal on Friday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, if you want it. I had a letter of intent that afternoon, and we ended up closing that deal up Friday for, a big number. And boom, that was it. And in hindsight, I learned a lot from that transaction. When I had made the transaction, we had also become a public company. Okay, so I went from being an entrepreneur, being the boss, to now working for a public company and being the president of a public company. And I ended up leaving Connecticut and moving to Denver, where the company was headquartered. And that was a big deal. I ended up getting married in Denver, and we quickly started to raise a family. And, I realized it was a big shock to me. Okay. I didn't like, you know, the scrutiny of being, held accountable, you know, being in a public company. And I mean, the rules and regulations and the Sarbanes-Oxleys and this and that. And plus, I was not exactly, in charge anymore. I was kind of, not really being able to do what I normally did. And plus, my first son was born, and I really just wanted to take some time off, and I retired. Basically, I ended up giving no. I cut my 3-year employment agreement. I think it only had a year and a half into it, and I decided to resign and just walk away from it all. I bought a place in Hawaii, and ended up spending half my life in Hawaii and half my time skiing in Denver.
Wow.
And it was great experience. We bought a home at the Four Seasons on the Big Island at Walleye.
Nice.
And so, we had a second son born during that period. And I was like doing the John Lennon thing. I hung up the Beatles and started, just hung up the guitar and started changing diapers for about 3 or 4 years. And I didn't know what to do. So the only thing I could do was to buy a travel agency. So I ended up buying a travel agency in Greenwich, Connecticut, where it all started.
Wow.
That was in 2004. And, started my own kind of roll up from that point on. And then at that time, I was a little different. It was different for me because here I am now, a family man, right? And there were things that were just a little more important to me, namely my family. And I kind of viewed things a little differently, in terms of trying to bring that whole entrepreneurial spirit back and what we had going at McGregor. It was different and it was hard because, I had walked away from, one of the largest companies in the United States. And now I have a little agency in Connecticut. I didn't have the same kind of, clout as I did before. I was kind of a little guy. But, I hung in there and I decided the best way to grow this is to really start buying more companies. Well, let's start to do that. And there, I started to acquire more and more companies, which was exciting again. It allowed me to grow much faster than through organic sales. And at the same time, the one thing I learned with each acquisition was I would buy it's like adding family. It's like every company that I bought had their own unique personality, unique employees. And, it was like giving new life to a company that was maybe in distress, or the owners may have had financial difficulty. But the one thing that I learned that I'd learned previous was it's really about the team. It's really about not so much growing the revenue, but it's kind of like growing the team, growing the family, if you will. And I learned quickly on, you're only as good as the people around you. And you can't do it all by yourself.
Right.
And you really need to have, a good team, if you will.
So if you think about where you are now, and if you had a chance to talk to yourself before you sold the other business, what advice would you give yourself knowing what you know now?
Sure. The things that I've learned, okay, acquiring 8 businesses, it helped me be on the buy side. So being on the buy side helps you prepare for the sell side, basically. And the one thing I learned, anyone that is entertaining selling their business, have a not only have a plan to do it, but have a post plan. Make sure you're really ready to sell, and you have something to look forward to after you sell. Um, Even if that means, you know, writing out your non-compete and coming back. I mean, that's always an idea. Sometimes people say, look, maybe I'll take some chips off the table right now, and 4 years, maybe I can do it again, but have a plan. Or maybe I'll never come back. I'll have made enough money. I'll have enough investments, and I won't need to worry about that. But at least have some sense of a plan. Number two, when you get ready to sell, do it in a way where the buyer can really have a nice package. I mean, clean up your business, clean up your balance sheet if you can. Do the housekeeping things that need to be done, so when you're ready to sell it, the buyer doesn't have, issues, and then it will help your value. I mean, the biggest thing is getting your multiple, obviously, and the cleaner the deal for the buyer, the higher the multiple is going to be, because he's going to look at how much he can earn off your business. And if you can be as profitable as possible, it's just going to drive your value up. So my advice would be to do as much housekeeping internally as you can to get your value driven up.
So when you think about your future now that you're re-engaged in the business, do you have a plan for your life after the business?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm in my 60s now. The clock is ticking. Yeah, I think I've learned a lot after doing it once before. I've learned the value of family and how important that is. Watching my boys grow up, and and doing the things that the bucket list stuff. Things that I'm in the fourth quarter right now. I mean, there's some things that I want to do before the eventual end, and you start to see things a little differently from that perspective. And I think family and friends are the most important thing in your life, and be able to share, the time that you have. I mean, to me, that's what's important.
That's great. This was fantastic for me. I hope for you.
I feel like much. I don't know.
No, it was fascinating. It truly was fascinating. And one of the things that I picked up is that I watched one of the other interviews that we did with another entrepreneur.
Right.
And he had a similar experience to you, where company was bought, he stayed on, he had people he had to answer to, and it was just not a good fit for him.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of one of the themes that we're seeing. And as you said, a lot of people, when they sell their business, really don't have a plan for after. Kind of like, well, I'm going to go to Hawaii, then I'm going to go skiing and playing golf. And there's just not that well-planned plan.
A lot has to do with your age. I was in my 30s. So, I didn't really think through that very well. Okay. When you're in your 60s, look, there's not a lot of time left. Okay. Spend it wisely. When you're in your 30s, what am I going to do here? And it was funny. One of my sons, I'll never forget, he was in, I don't know, kindergarten. And they had like this day where, what does your dad do? Well, that like, what is your, something about, what does your dad do? And my son said, my dad has lunch and plays golf. Okay. he goes to lunch and plays golf. And I went, wow, that's what my son thinks of my career right now. That's what I do. I go to lunch and I play golf. And I go, that's not very good. Okay. So I said, I got to get back to work. So, but I really didn't know what to do with myself. It was very, very difficult. And I just ended up going back to what I really knew. And that's when I kind of got stuck in out of college. And, I'm really good at what I do.
Yeah.
I think you just stick to what you know, and the rest of it will get figured out.
You got an offer for a 5 to 6 multiple of your company. You flew to Denver in 1 hour. You got 8 to 9.
Yeah.
What did you do in that meeting that got you? That jumped to essentially 50% more.
I was dealing with the CEO of the company. I made it a point to go straight to the top, basically. I wasn't dealing with, the arm or the branch or the folks that were tasked with buying companies. I went straight to the CEO. I said, look, I want to talk to the CEO that makes the ultimate decision. And I taken that advice from someone that was close to it. And so I made the lunch, I made the appointment, I flew there. And, I remember walking down a hall and he just started throwing numbers at me until I finally agreed to it. And it was that easy. I probably could have gotten 10. And, I felt like, 8 was fair. And at the time, it was kind of territory. I'm not sure very many people have been there before, especially selling to a public company. Most of these transactions are done privately. To take a stock offer like that, I would have done things differently. I wouldn't have taken all stock. Okay. But it all worked out in the end. But it was, I think a lot of it was my youthfulness and my naivety. I learned a lot from that. And it helped me prepare for buying companies. It was a great thing to be able to now create my own roll up, if you will. And so it was a great experience from that regard.
Do you give away 10 multiples that easily?
Yeah, I don't know. I would think in our space 10 multiples exist, but you never know. Things can change, and our industry though really has a lot of synergies. We're a business that bigger is better. Bigger is just how our revenues are constructed and how they are derived. Bigger is more. $1 in a smaller company means $2 in a bigger company. So these, simply by taking that revenue and putting it through the grinder, $1 spits out $2 over here. So that's not always the same case with each, business or industry. Then you couple the synergies of cutting costs. That $1 may be $3 over here. So it's a great model to roll up businesses, and there's all shapes and sizes out there. Anyway,
this was fascinating. I could literally listen to you for another hour, honestly.